What I read, The Chalice and the Blade, Our History, Our Future, by Rihanna Eisler. The author began researching the ideas for this book after asking some questions that she could not find satisfying answers to, such as, why do we hunt and persecute each other? Why is our world full of inhumanity, especially to women? Why are human beings so brutal to each other, and why cruelty rather than kindness? As she began her research, she learned that many of the things that we have been taught, historically and archaeologically, are in fact incorrect, that history has been purposely slanted, altered, and rearranged to fit a male-dominated paradigm. As more women scientists, researchers, and archaeologists complete their research, they find the key concept missing and left out: the worship of the goddess divine. She explains the new theory of cultural evolution, that there are two basic models of society: a dominator model, patriarchy, the ranking of half of humanity over the other half, the blade, and then the partnership model, where diversity is not equated with either inferiority or superiority, the chalice. From this new research, we find that the original direction of humanity followed the partnership model, and after a period of chaos and almost total cultural disruption, switched to the dominator model. Dr. Eisler asks what we will do now at the crossroads humanity is currently at. What road will we choose? The new and newly interpreted archaeological evidence shows that early civilizations believed in rebirth after death. They believed the powers of life and death were governed by women. They believed humans and the natural environment are integrally linked parts of the mystery of life and death, and there was awe and worship of the fact that life emerges from the body of a woman. They found extensive art relics depicting worship of the mother goddess. 1/20th of one mound, covering approximately 800 years, yielded, quote, a remarkably advanced center for art, with wall paints, plaster relief, stone sculptures, and large quantities of goddess figurines made of clay, all focusing on the worship of a female deity. The author explains that what we think we know about cultural evolution has in fact been based on interpretation put forth by men to conform to the current model of society. New research is showing a very different picture of how earlier societies are compared to what we know. There is an absence of imagery idealizing violence, no images of noble warriors or scenes of battle. There is an absence of chieftain burials, no sign of mighty rulers, large caches of weapons, many representations of nature, beauty and worship of the goddess, sun and water patterns, serpents and butterflies, signs of metamorphosis. She explains that although it is natural to assume that if it isn't patriarchy, then it is matriarchy, that in fact was not true either. That the evidence strongly points to a partnership society. The evidence of male humans or male animals appears to affirm and strengthen the female, neither appearing subordinate to the other. By complementing one another, their power is doubled. She describes the evidence found at the ancient site of Crete. It was an ancient civilization on the Mediterranean island of Crete, discovered at the turn of the 20th century. They were very technologically advanced and socially complex. Multi-storied palaces, villas, farmsteads, cities, harbors, roads, places of worship, and burial grounds. The goddess divine was worshipped. There were no signs of war. The economy prospered and the arts flourished. There was an ardent faith and belief in the beauty and power of nature. There was a spirit of joy and harmony between men and women as equal participants in life. Sports such as bull sports that both men and women took part in, music, singing, dancing, weapons, but not idolizing warfare. The author explains what theoretically happened between this civilization of Crete and what we currently live in, and she calls it the Dark Order out of chaos, from the Chalice to the Blade. It began with nomadic tribe invaders, Hebrews from the deserts of the south, Indo-European or Aryan language speaking, the beginnings of Judaism and Christianity. The nomadic tribes that were invading civilizations such as Crete had angry gods of war. They had warrior priests. They believed in conquering land and taking resources. There was male dominance and male violence. They acquired material wealth through destruction, high-tech production of weapons, metal weaponry. The values of the invaders included the core principle being a higher value on taking rather than giving. This ultimately resulted in the enslavement of women as male consorts or concubines. It was the violent reduction of women and thus also their female and male children as male possessions. As the world slowly transformed from a partnership cultural evolutionary model to the male-dominated model, legends remained. The legend of Atlantis, the Garden of Eden, the Tablets of Sumer all speak of a more harmonious time where women and men lived in idyllic garden-themed represented legends. These legends remembered the partnership model when nature was respected and both sexes were valued. Yes, it was the invaders, metal weapons, and violence that began the movement. But ultimately, the pen is mightier than the sword, and it was the writings that ultimately proved the most damaging. Through new legends decrying the power of women as mothers and motherhood in general, women were considered merely incubators for male sperm. There were ideas that a mother and child are not truly related, that only patrilineal matters. The last remaining representatives of women's old powers in myth and legends were reduced to lesser and marginal figures in a male-dominated pantheon of new gods. Powerful religious leaders, respected scientists, taught and spread the word that women are creatures put on earth by God to provide men with children, preferably sons. Surnames told only of their relationship to the father, which is a tradition we still keep today. After thousands of years of relentless indoctrination, we now think this is simply the way things are. The author talks about the power of religious stories to marginalize women, the sacred stories of what is good and what is evil, Adam and Eve, the serpent representing woman. The sin of Eve was that when she defied Jehovah and herself dared to go to the source of knowledge, the tree of knowledge, it was in fact her refusal to give up her worship. And because she, the first symbolic woman, she clung to the old faith more tenaciously than did Adam, who only followed her lead. Her punishment was to be more dreadful. Henceforth she would have to submit in all things. Not only her sorrow, but her conception, the number of children she must bear, was greatly multiplied, and for all eternity she would be ruled by this vengeful God and his earthly representative, man. As the dominator model continued to reroute civilization, women were stripped of their decision-making powers. They were no longer allowed leadership roles and no longer allowed to hold spiritual leader positions. All goddess representations were reduced to partners of more powerful gods. In the Bible, the Old Testament proclaimed that it is God's will that woman be ruled by man. The Bible also states there is a good reason for the killing of a woman if she is not a virgin when she marries. Laws were enacted to regulate a woman's virginity to a father to be paid correctly by the future husband. The so-called sacred text of the Bible set forth, by divine law, one half of humanity can legally be handed over by their own fathers and husbands to be raped, beaten, tortured, or killed without any fear of punishment or even moral disapproval. Other messages taught by the Bible is that seeking knowledge is the most abhorrent of crimes. Killing and enslaving other human beings is condonable, and giving birth is dirty. The love of life and nature, sharing rather than taking, caring rather than oppressing, the view of power as responsibility rather than domination did not die out. It was relegated to second place. And there are many times historically when the conflict between the chalice and the blade surfaces, but it is always held down by the blade. In the New Testament, Jesus ultimately represented Gilani, the chalice, a partnership model for humanity. He met and taught women as equals. He rejected male supremacist norms. He believed women were spiritually equal to men. But again, domination model distorted his teachings, and it became standard practice for church leaders themselves to command the torture and execution of all who do not accept the new order. The author explains that when observing the fluctuations in history between the two models of cultural evolution, that patterns can be detected. Times of war are also times of more dominated society. More peaceful times are times of greater equality. Witch hunts were organized campaigns initiated by the church and state to suppress women and maintain androcracy, a way to counter recurring Gilanic resurgences. Documenting peaceful times, well-known and respected authors or scientists speaking out for women was followed by violent wars or surges in violence. Coming into current times, the author describes the first lines of defense in androcratic systems is the reassertion of male control. Art and stories such as Don Juan, a glorified rapist, The Taming of the Shrew, which glorifies torture of women, literature and film, the graphic portrayal of women, murder and rape, graphic pornography glorifying sexual violence as pleasure, the brutalization, enslavement, torture, mutilation, degradation, and humiliation of the female sex, increases in aggravated assault, bone-breaking domestic beatings, setting of a wife on fire, putting out of her eyes, Indian bride burnings, Iranian public executions, Latin American imprisonments and tortures, worldwide wife batterings, and the global terrorism of rapes. If androcracy is to be maintained, women must be suppressed at all costs. We are currently in a time of a rise in feminine values threatening to transform the system. Will the current swing take us forward to a partnership model, or take us back down to suppression, violence, and war? This was to be the age of reason. Never before have people been so literate. Never before has communication spread so freely through the world. This ideological explosion, an awakening, new ways of perceiving. Democracies have replaced monarchies, secular schools have replaced religious ones, autocratic families replacing male-dominated families, the rise of feminism and women's rights. Those things in hand with the threat and power of nuclear war, ecological imbalances and global climate change, the effects of acid rain, rising levels of radioactivity, toxic dumps, and other forms of industrial and military pollution, the destruction of forests, losses of arable soil, famine and poverty, the androcratic destruction of nature. We have lived in a dominator society for over 5,000 years. The problem is not men as a sex, but men and women as they are socialized in a dominator system. Women and men all over the world are, for the first time in such large numbers, frontally challenging the dominator model. They are refusing the model of the war of the sexes. There is a growing awareness of the power of global partnership. There is a focus on a more holistic approach, more on relationships than hierarchies. Thinking with a more feminine approach, more intuitively, drawing conclusions from a totality of a simultaneous impression rather than through step-by-step logical thinking, and the new science of empathy, using both reason and intuition to bring about a change in the collective mind. People are practicing solving conflicts without violence and redefining what power really means. There is a reconnection with the earlier spiritual tradition of goddess worship, nature worship, and respect, love, and awe for the natural world. This is the actualization of higher evolutionary potentials, the freedom of wisdom and knowledge, where both men and women can find out what being human can mean. I am really thankful that Jane and Janie recommended this book to me. There have been 2 times in my life that I have experienced incredible unfairness because I am a woman. I feel like these things have happened to me for a reason, because I am meant to be a part of the movement that promotes and works toward the partnership model. I think we all are. I will take the difficult things, the sadness and grief, and the pain I have experienced, and use it to help others.